The president of Judicial Watch is on the line, Tom Fitton. Tom, great to have you back on the broadcast. There was a quote from Joe Biden's 60 Minutes interview over the weekend where he said there's not a single thing that I've observed at all from that would affect me or the United States relative to my son, Hunter. Is he stupid? Is he lying? Is it a combination? What's going on, Tom?
Hey, Alex, thank you. I think it's the president who doesn't want to be a witness against his son while falsely asserting that he had nothing to do with his activities. So I didn't observe, which is a signal to the Justice Department, don't ask me any questions. But, of course, it's completely at odds with the material on his laptop, with Tony Bobolinsky, with his own son's statements to media. And the evidence is clear that this was a racketeering-type scheme that involved using the vice president's office to create wealth for his family and him.
I want to ask you about what you see from what we know from the laptop, from what we know from any public statements by Hunter Biden that you think are potentially illegal or demand investigation, and what could be done potentially to investigate those things.
Well, I mean, the simplest thing is the most famous phrase. It's 10% for the big guy, and that phrase has been confirmed 6 ways to Sunday about money directed to the vice president. Now, this is material from after he was vice president, but we have instance after instance of Hunter Biden and his business associates dealing directly with Joe Biden as vice president of the United States. And, Joe has lied about his knowledge of his son's work. He said, I never discuss business with him. And this is going back years, at least to the beginning during the campaign era, during the 2020 campaign. Hunter said, Joe said to me, I hope you know what you're doing. And of course, you have his brother also involved in this. And supposedly there's a Delaware grand jury under the U.S. attorney in the backwater and up there investigating this, which tells you the Justice Department doesn't want anything really done, and that this has been slow. This has been slow going. They've been basically burying this investigation, and there needs to be a special counsel. And the rules require it. Remember what they said about Mueller. The Justice Department can't investigate the president and people close to him and his family. And why aren't those rules being applied here? It's a corrupt cover-up, and it's a scandal. It's the number one scandal under Garland, in my view, his refusal to investigate criminal activity tied to the president that's readily apparent to any other citizen who looks at it.
First, I want to talk about the more details on the corruption or apparent corruption or perhaps illegality, and then I want to talk about what the process would be to fully get to the bottom of the extent to how much illegality has taken place. But you noted something that Joe Biden had said that he'd never talked about business with Hunter. I looked into it just when he was vice president, and Hunter Biden took at least 23 flights out of Joint Base Andrews, which is where Air Force One, Air Force Two is. Presumably those are flights with Joe. I imagine a lot of those are international flights because we know he went to China with Joe. And are we supposed to believe that they didn't talk business on 13-hour plane flights? And if so, then what kind of a horrible dad is Joe Biden if he doesn't even take any interest in what his son is doing? It's so far-fetched. It's far-fetched in either direction. So why was there no curiosity from the media that this happened? It's the media didn't report that detail. I reported it last year after, it's a 6-7-year-old detail. No one noted it. Why is that? I actually got it out of some of your, by the way, Tom, you get credit for this because I was going through some of the documents you unearthed with FOIA requests to calculate that. It's pretty stunning stuff.
Yeah, 5 trips to China, a trip to Russia. And then he stopped using Secret Service protection. So for a good period of the president vice president's second term, we don't know what he was doing. Now, right now, we sue the Secret Service for their current activities related to Hunter Biden to find out where Hunter's been and what we're spending on the security. They're stonewalling that. We sued the State Department just a few weeks ago on material about Hunter and China and, Burisma and Ukraine and other countries. They're stonewalling that. And the media isn't just incurious. Alex, they attack anyone who asks these questions. Heck, they impeached the media's allies in Congress, impeached with their full support Trump for raising questions about Biden corruption. They suppressed happily material about the Hunter Biden laptop, and even now, grudgingly, while admitting it's true, attack those who brought it forward. It's this is not a media that just suppresses, that I quote, ignore stories they don't like. They attack those who do independent journalism that they oppose because of political reasons.
So what is the plan of battle here, so to speak, if the Republicans get the Congress, if they get the House, the Senate? What is the process to start investigating some of these things?
Well, hopefully the Republicans get their act together. I'm not confident that the experience is going to be too different than prior congressional investigations.
Me neither.
The challenge Republicans have is they couldn't get records out of a Republican administration under Trump on these types of abuses, and see where they're going to go on this. In the end, we need prosecutions, and we need to control the agencies that have used their powers to protect Hunter while targeting Trump. So a politicized DOJ and the FBI need to have their wings clipped, and that means significant cuts to their budget and their authorities. Until things are restored, reformed, restructured, redone, renamed, reviewed, DOJ and FBI should be begging for dollars.
One thing that strikes me in this is that you noted how the Republicans have had such a horrible track record of this. They've had a horrible track record of getting to the bottom of things, even when they hold the power. And if you think about, and I've spoken to enough cabinet secretaries about this over the years, it's not just the people at the top. It's not just the Merrick Garlands of the world. It is so often the people who are in the building who you'll never know their names, or their names might come and go in the news cycle in a day or two. It's a cultural thing in Washington, inside the Beltway. And how do you drain the swamp? Because Trump tried, and he made more progress than other people would have, but it just seems like the urgency to drain the swamp has never been more clear. And I just don't know if the task is realistic, but it has to be. We can't shy away from it.
Well, it has to be a priority for the leadership, and it's not a priority for the leadership. And we're going to have a continuing resolution likely at the end of the month, for instance. Alex, do you think that it's going to get passed with no Republican votes? And by a continuing resolution, I mean funding every bad thing Republicans say they're against, every abuse that Biden is using government funds for. That is likely to be funded with Republican votes. So until some of that changes in a significant respect, we're just going to keep on barreling along towards despotism.
Yeah, and that's what's happening, and that's where the lack of interest in holding the first family accountable. And I was struck by this with the first impeachment, is that if the rule is that you can't investigate a family specifically because they're in politics, you would think that's a third world thing, and that was the whole implication of it, is that if a family is political, then you can't have investigations into them because it could benefit their political opponents. That just creates a culture of corruption. It codifies it. We already know the culture is there. That's how you spend every day in it. But it just feels like we're now publicly saying openly that this is what we want. We want two systems of justice, one for the Biden family and one for the rest of us, one for the Clinton family and one for the rest of us. And I just don't know if that's sustainable as a society.
No, and the other side of this, it's two sides of the same coin. When I talk about the despotism, I'm talking about the Biden administration and the Congress through the January 6th Rump Committee trying to jail their political enemies.
Sure.
Suggesting that disputing an election under law ought to be illegal and subject you to punishment. Countless subpoenas, and we're talking about the 35 or 50, whatever the number is, just recently. That's just a portion of what's put out there. I mean, they're targeting potentially hundreds of Americans, including elected officials, who dispute Biden's election or took steps to dispute Biden's election as is appropriate under federal, state law and the U.S. Constitution. So trying to outlaw dissent and jail your political enemies, we haven't seen that before, at least in the modern era. And, at least in third world countries, they don't pretend to be anything other than banana republics. They know what goes on, and they don't make any excuses for it when the strongman leader targets their political enemies with jail and worse. Here, we're supposed to pretend it's different when, in fact, Biden is behaving exactly the same, and with the support and actually the collaboration, and they're doing it separately too, of the Pelosi Congress. These are terrible times for our Republican form of government, because our institutions and our freedoms are under significant attack in a way we haven't seen before from really kind of this corrupt communist movement that's arisen within those who control the federal government.
Tom Fitton is with me, the president of Judicial Watch, one of the rare groups in Washington that's wildly productive. So there's always something big happening with Judicial Watch. Let me run a couple other items by you. I want to get your thoughts on the FBI raid on Mar-A-Lago. Did it even happen? I don't hear about it anymore. Is there anything that we're going to ever learn from this unprecedented raid on the home of the president, where they were in his wife's closet and they were in his young son's room? And did they get anything of note, or are we ever going to figure that out?
I think they're desperate to hide what they did find. In my view, it was nothing more than a harassment operation against Trump. There was no legal basis for it. I don't know if I talked to you about it yet, Alex, but in the early part of the year, when I first read these news reports that the archives had harassed Trump into turning some documents over to him, I said, what the heck's going on here? We fought this same issue. And the Justice Department and archives and a federal court, when most liberal judges up here in D.C. said, look, Judicial Watch, it doesn't matter that Bill Clinton had these tapes where they recorded him talking to foreign leaders, which of course would be presumptively classified. You can't do anything about it. He has the right to make these decisions as to whether to keep them personal or presidential. And in fact, the Justice Department told the court the fact that he had them after he left office means presumptively means they're personal. So they changed, because it's Trump, they changed their enforcement of the law, and frankly, they're lying to the courts about their positions here, and went and raided his home. Completely lawless, in my view. And the corruption continues. They don't want the courts to find out what they might have been really looking for. In some ways, I think that they were looking to see what he had on them.
Yeah, and so do you...
They're going to continue, but, in the end,
right.
Alex, they want to put him in jail.
Yes.
Or significantly hamper him because, any candidacy he might pursue personally or on behalf of others, they see as a threat.
I want to ask you what you think are the potential outcomes here, because I also think there's a downside of this thing getting dragged out a long time if Trump runs, and if he does run, he'll be the front runner to win a Republican primary, not say he's a shoe-in, and I've said on the show, Tom, I think that it's a good thing to have primaries. I don't think it's good to have coronations in general, but he'll be the front runner, and if he wins a primary, then if this thing all starts playing out again, it could be moving into general election time if this thing is delayed long enough, and is just so we could just really get distracted as a country and not focus on the things that matter: inflation, the border, corruption. And we're just talking about the documents the president could have declassified in a moment's notice when he was president that were in his closet. It's the media is going to try to convince us we care very deeply about this stuff. What should we be caring about here? What are really the important points?
Well, I don't presume to be a political maven. I like to sue government and Judicial Watch, and
yeah,
I defer to you. I defer to experts like you, Alex. But if I think the argument needs to be put out there, because all these issues that you highlight are important. That one way to avoid dealing with these issues is to destroy those who would address them aggressively and forthrightly, as the American people desire. So, when you have a president, and you just look at his work as president, who took significant steps to control the border, and much more successfully in many ways than other presidents have. And other significant steps in terms of reining back the administrative state and taking on this cultural warfare, this neo-Marxist cultural warfare on Americans and children with this transgender extremism and critical race theory. Well, how do you deal with that? Well, there are many ways to deal with it. You can oppose that politically, right? You can, if you're the left, or you can just try to jail those who oppose you. They've chosen the latter. So you can't untie the attacks on Trump with the underlying issues that the left are pursuing otherwise, because and that's been the failure of the Republicans and too many conservatives here in town. They think the two are separated, and they're not. You can't have one without the other. And unless you address one, you won't be able to make as significant inroads as you would like on the public policy issues that people supposedly are supposed to be mostly interested in.
A couple other ones I want to run by you again. Tom Fitton, judicialwatch.org, if you want to support him, and you should. First one is what's going on with the border, and then these brilliant moves by governors Abbott and DeSantis to highlight the hypocrisy of our open border and sanctuary city policies from the left. But what do you think are the main important points here that are being communicated? Do you think the public is understanding that these governors are just drawing attention to the fact that we have 2 million people coming across our border this year? The cartels, as you just tweeted recently, have operational control over our border, which I think is entirely accurate. What do you think is the important lessons here, and are people getting it? Are people understanding it?
I think it's like most issues. There's a 50-50 split on this. And most Americans obviously don't want 5 million people walking across the border to reside here overwhelmingly as, unlawfully present aliens. No one voted for that. And, this
right.
to me would be the number one reason for impeaching and removing Biden and everyone else who is betraying the country and their oaths of office here. I'd recommend DeSantis, and this game about moving the migrants is I think something that turns out to has been useful in educating Americans about the hypocrisy of the left. But we've got a major issue that needs to be addressed right now. It's an emergency, and if I were the governor of Texas and the governor of Florida and other governors who are interested in defending the rule of law here, I think I'd note the reality that this is an invasion, and put the National Guard troops from the several states on the border to stop it. And it can be done almost immediately. And, it'll be a constitutional battle out of it. But that to me is something worth fighting about in the courts, about the states' rights to repel an invasion when the federal government abandons them, which is what's happened. So the governor of Texas and the governor of Florida and the governor of, the other governors of other states who, think this is an issue, the Constitution allows them specifically to get together to stop this, and they should.
Tom, last one I want to run by you today. There's this viral video from the Libs of TikTok account where a TikToker who works for a left-wing nonprofit backed by Soros and others said that he was offered cash to make anti-Trump and anti-Republican videos. Should be pretty clear, open and shut violation of operational laws regarding 501c3s, but again, we don't. It's just the one whistleblower at this point. You tweeted 2 days ago that you found this interesting. Have you given any more thought? Is there anything beyond that at this point?
I mean, based on what the whistleblower said, to be told by a C3 you should go out and specifically an attack at a party, and that's part of their program, that's usually something that is frowned upon, and that's putting it charitably. And what is also interesting is that typically, and to be clear, there's no legal requirement that any of this be disclosed, but usually you go on to a site of a nonprofit that's in operation and doing public policy work like this group purports to be doing, and you find out, and they tell you who the leadership is. And it's very murky. You can't find that information, which is unusual. So it's curious what's going on here. But, just to be clear, what they're trying to do, again, is through this program, whether it's good or bad, is basically target those who object to people being able to steal elections, who want to be able to dispute elections. And they want to target them with hit pieces paid with these charitable dollars. And, when you look at what he says, this is not necessarily this isn't a careful analysis of election law. This is go after, quote, MAGA, go after, quote, Republicans. And it's a political, it looks like a nonprofit, political jihad against Trump and his supporters.
Wow. You noted something that's really interesting that I hadn't thought of, which is this group, the Good Information Foundation. Doesn't get more Orwellian than that. So you said you looked into it and you couldn't find a lot of information on their leadership?
Well, if you go to their website, and, admittedly, I'm not as perfect on the internet as all, everyone on Twitter, right? I didn't see who their leadership was on their internet site.
Wow.
I thought that was odd.
Interesting. And one can only wonder what this would have...
The irony, to be clear, they're not required legally to post it, but certainly that's the sort of basic information that most nonprofits post.
Right, exactly.
I don't understand why it's not. I don't understand why their names aren't there, who's running it, who's on the board of directors. And they're a new enough group that they're publicly, what would be publicly available financial information isn't available yet. So the question is, are they going to be participating in these public policy debates in and around the election, and without anyone really knowing who they are or what or where they're, how much money they have or anything else? My guess is that's probably going to be the case.
Fascinating. Tom Fitton, president of Judicial Watch. Tom, I feel like we could go all day, but you've been really generous, and I hope to have you back soon.
You're welcome, Alex. I appreciate the time.
Same to you.